Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Made for Sin by Stacia Kane, narrated by Aiden Snow. Chapter 1. The home of Lazzaro Duretti sat way back from the road, hidden by a stucco wall and a row of trees. The wall and trees in turn hid a couple of guard posts, with armed men watching the street and the wide green lawn. Two towers at opposite ends of the sprawling cream-colored mansion held more guards and guns and a direct line to a private security company that was more like an army. It was a hell of a setup, really, one the vast majority of people wouldn't be able to afford. One Lazzaro Duretti wouldn't have been able to afford if he'd been the honest businessman he claimed to be. Speare hit his brakes and rolled his window down at the wrought iron gate, ready to identify himself to the video camera there. But the gate was already swinging open. Not unusual, really, but given what his mother had said, it probably wasn't a good sign. He nudged his old Dart up the curving driveway and stopped right in front of the house's columned entrance. Statues of nymphs and satyrs, the usual pretentiousness, with some extra mysticism to reflect Lazzaro's devotion to the old magics, flanked the double doors. Just like the two thick-set men in pale, bulletproof vest-concealing suits did. Speare nodded at them. "Hey, Artie. Silvio." Silvio gave him a curt nod in return, probably still pissed about losing $100 to him in a pickup poker game the week before. But Artie offered a subdued smile as he opened the door. "He's waiting for you in the kitchen. Hope you're hungry." "That bad, huh?" Artie's smile faded. Bad news, man. He's cooking up a feast in there." Shit. That probably meant carting home a load of Tupperware before he hit the strip later. Like he had time to waste on that, when he hadn't committed anything that could be considered a sin in... Oh, no. He'd lied to his mother. It was only a venial sin, but it might give him an extra hour or two before the beast in his head started getting grumpy. And that hadn't even been a beast-avoiding lie. He just hated telling his mother the truth. About anything. "What happened?" Artie shook his head. "Ought to hear it from him. I ain't sure of the details, but it's bad news." "Probably that bastard Fallerstein," Silvio said. "I bet he's behind it." Fallerstein. If that was why Lazzaro had called him. Damn it. He'd told the old man before that he didn't want to get involved in his mob bullshit. Not involved like that, at least. Artie and Silvio didn't need to hear that, though. "Well, I guess I'll find out, huh?" "I guess you will," Artie said, patting him on the back as he crossed the threshold. "In the kitchen." Speare followed the scent of cooking through the cavernous rooms of Lazzaro's inner sanctum. Once it had been full of old-school Vegas charm, like the Rat Pack had just walked out of it on their way to take a steam. That was before Lazzaro's third wife had moved in and given it a horrific makeover. She'd hired some decorator who, she'd breathlessly informed Speare, all the celebrities used. But celebrity didn't mean taste. Or the guy had seen dollar signs and a chance to dump all the kickback crap he didn't want to store himself. Speare figured it was a mixture of both, but either way, the place was full of gold leaf and shiny flocked wallpaper and ruffled pink bordello curtains. Mirrors hung on almost every wall, too, amplifying the neon glare. Speare wasn't a guy who knew much about decorating, but he knew that place hurt his eyes. The third Mrs. Duretti, though, she did not hurt his eyes. She was in the main living room. The house had 3 or 4 of them when he passed through. She leaped up when he entered, displaying the best body money could buy, clad in a tight, hot pink dress apparently designed for very wealthy prostitutes, and started mincing her way toward him in her 5-inch heels. "Speare, honey, you came." As subtly as possible, he took a step back. "Hi, Cookie. He's in the kitchen?" "Can't you smell it?" Her long gold fingernails flashed as she waved her hand in front of her nose. "It takes ages to get the garlic smell out of the curtains, and I'm having a party here later." He'd have to get out of there fast then. "Oh? What time?"
3?
She gave him a coy look, batting artificial eyelashes beneath bangs of equally artificial platinum blonde. Cookie was younger than all 6 of Lazaro's sons, and any day Speare expected to hear that she'd finally relented and agreed to try to give him the last one he was so desperate for. A 7th son, a mystical son. It hadn't happened yet, though.
It's a bridal shower, but you could come visit. A big, strong man like you might be just what the party needs. The girls would be glad to see you.
Yeah, he bet they would. Cookie's friends were brightly decorated predators on the hunt for men with money or muscles or both, and he'd been in their sights before. He took another step back. Sorry, I'm reading to the elderly at 3. Her shrill laugh stabbed at his spine.
You reading to old people? Why, did a judge order you to?
I'm reforming, he said, edging away from her bright red smile and toward the arched doorway. Turning over a new leaf.
That's what they all say,
Cookie sighed.
Only it's never true, is it?
Lucky for her it wasn't, he thought, but didn't say it. It wouldn't have been nice or fair. Instead, he just gave her a little salute and headed into the kitchen. Artie hadn't been kidding about the amount of cooking going on in there. The 6-burner stove, one of Lazaro's pride and joys, was covered with pots and pans. Lights were on in both ovens. Jesus, Uncle Laz. It looks like the prep kitchen for a Knights of Columbus banquet in here. Lazaro Duretti turned away from whatever he was stirring and lifted his arms, inviting an embrace. Lazaro, he said, using Speare's middle name as always, in a somber, subdued tone. You've come. Mom said you needed me. Speare bent down to hug the old man who might be his father, who was his father, if his mother was to be believed. Certainly that was why his own middle name was Lazaro, and certainly the old man insisted on calling him by it, and there was nothing Speare could do or say to stop him. What's up? Darling Vera. How is she? Like he hadn't just talked to her that morning. She's fine. Good. Hell of a woman, your mother. Hell of a woman. Best legs in the city to this day. Laz busied himself at the stove for a minute. When he turned, he held a plate full of what Speare was pretty sure must have been all the meat in Vegas at the moment. Here, a few things. See if you like them. Speare took a seat at the island-cum-breakfast bar opposite the old man and eyed the heap of food. God, whatever news it was must have been devastating. There was a pig's trotter on that plate, and what looked like rabbit, along with an enormous square of lasagna and some stuffed calamari. All of the meats had different sauces. It would take a glutton an hour to get through all of that. Well, he had an hour, and while gluttony was generally one of his least favorite deadly sins, it was still a deadly sin. He took the plate and accepted the fork being brandished at him. Thanks. I'm sure I will. Laz somehow managed to still look serious while beaming at him, exposing the Borgnine-esque gap in his front teeth. Of course you will. You're a good boy, Lazaro. You've always been a good boy. Jesus, Speare tensed. What exactly did the old man want him to do? The good boy bullshit came out only when the task requested was particularly nasty. The oven beeped. Laz donned oven mitts of the same muted red as the various accessories dotting the room. He'd refused to allow Cookie to redecorate his kitchen, which had been designed with the help of the second Mrs. Duretti, a fan of French colonial, and removed a sheet pan of what Speare recognized as choux pastry. His sinking feeling increased. Laz caught him looking. For croquembouche. Uh-huh. What's going on? He would have continued, but he'd unthinkingly popped a forkful of lasagna into his mouth and had to stop for a minute to savor it. Laz's teeth showed even more. He resembled some sort of beatific food gnome, with his balding head and bulbous nose. Good? Speare told the truth. You're an artist. The compliment made the old man's eyes light up. One day, Lazaro, one day I'll open a restaurant. The smile disappeared. Maybe sooner than I wanted. You know what happened this morning, my boy? You heard? Speare shook his head, unable to talk around the mouthful of stewed rabbit, making his taste buds do some kind of rumba. Laz stood there for a moment, obviously gathering the words. This morning, he finally said in a low, tight voice. This morning, they found Theodore Bryant in a dumpster. They found him in a dumpster with his arm gone, his right arm. Jesus. The world went quiet for a second while Speare absorbed that news. Theodore Bryant, one of Lazaro Duretti's biggest muscle men, more than that even, an ex-boxer whose right hook had finally led him to be banned from the sport. They could overlook one death in the ring, but 3 had been pushing it. And who could shoot the eye out of a squirrel from 100 yards? Or probably could have, at least. As far as Speare knew, Bryant hadn't felt any need to shoot squirrels. There were plenty of humans he could shoot. How could that guy be dead? Finally, he found his voice. I'm sorry, Uncle Laz. God rest him. May his soul awaken in the realm of silver. Laz crossed himself, then crossed his fists over his chest and dipped his head, acknowledging both statements. Thank you. He was loyal. A great loss. Here it came. So, do you know who did it? Who do you think? While he spoke, Laz began tearing at a fresh-baked loaf of bread on the countertop, tearing it with violence, as if it had somehow offended him. Fallerstein. Who else? Who else would want to hurt me like that? Speare could think of a lot of people who might want to hurt the man who controlled half the supply services in Vegas, but he kept his mouth shut. Or rather, he kept his mouth full of rabbit in some velvety sauce with mustard and herbs, with calamari that still tasted of the sea, with a bite of that same warm bread. Nobody, Laz went on. He brandished a chunk of bread like a knife, his face reddening. Nobody else wants to hurt me, because nobody else is a dumb fuck. They know what happens to men who think they can hurt me. They know that men who try to hurt me end up feeding vultures. The hard way. Fallerstein knows that too. Speare kept his voice as non-committal, as calm as possible. No point upsetting Laz further. Are you sure it's even related to business? Maybe he just slept with the wrong woman and got caught. And her man took his arm? His right arm, his powerful arm, took it above the shoulder, his whole arm? You understand? Not just part of it. That did sound weird, but still. I know it isn't likely. I'm just saying we don't know it's Fallerstein. We can't be sure. But we will be, Laz said, smiling again. We will be, because you're going to prove it, right? You're going to find out who did this, and you'll tell me, and the scavengers can eat his intestines while he watches from the deepest world below hell. Chapter 2. It was over an hour before Speare finally managed to extricate himself from Duretti's house, and another couple of hours before he'd managed to drop off the expected stack of filled-to-the-brim Tupperware at his house and make the trek to the McDonald's in Whitney. Well, he wasn't actually going to McDonald's, which was probably a good thing considering he was still stuffed from the enormous amount of food Laz had pressed upon him. He was going to the parking lot behind McDonald's. Construction going on next to it blocked its view from the street, which made it a convenient place to meet people he didn't want to be seen meeting. Or to meet people who didn't want to be seen meeting him. Chuck Majowski, LVMPD, homicide, was already there, sitting in his unmarked cruiser with the engine running. Speare backed his own car into the next spot, then slid smoothly out of the driver's seat and into the passenger seat of Majowski's Dodge. Speare, Majowski said, with what wasn't quite a sneer. Doing murder investigations now? I thought your line was following husbands to strip clubs or catching insurance scammers. I guess Laz thinks he needs somebody who knows what he's doing on this one, Speare replied. Yeah, all the cops like to make fun of his work. Let them. He made more money than they did, he had more free time, and he wasn't constantly under scrutiny. It almost made him glad that the beast had made it impossible for him to join the force the way he'd hoped to do when he was a kid. Someone who can actually solve it. Majowski stared at him for a long moment. Speare stared back, perfectly calm. Majowski didn't scare him. He never had, but he especially didn't at the moment, when they both knew that Lazaro Duretti would cut Majowski loose if he tried anything. No more kickbacks, no more moonlighting, no more college funds or Caribbean vacations. No more job either, because Duretti's payroll stretched way over Majowski's rather pointy, balding head. Then Majowski smiled, a genuine smile. Well, maybe you're right, I guess. The Speare doesn't have to worry about constitutional rights and Miranda warnings. You don't have to do it the right way. Speare ignored the nickname, but gave Majowski a thin smile in return. Any way that finds the killer is the right way. The sooner you give me what I need, the sooner I can start. Right. Majowski reached into the pocket of his door and pulled out a manila folder. Here, everything we have so far. Photocopies, of course, and some of it's not typed up. Let me know if you have trouble reading any of it. The handwriting may not all be great. All the pictures are there. The autopsy's not done yet, so I'll call you when I have it. Tomorrow's most likely. They're speeding this one through, including the tox results and all that other shit. But you know it'll still take a good few days, at least for tox. Speare flipped through the file. Lots of notes, witness interviews, pictures. Oh, worse than he'd thought. They really wanted that arm. Sure did, Majowski said. He sounded almost admiring. Took the whole damn thing, collarbones, shoulder blade, all of it. I'm thinking it's probably some kind of sorcery thing, you know? But it could just be some serial killer's got a weird fetish. Clean cuts, Speare said, examining the close-up picture. The bright sunlight coming through the passenger window made the paper gleam, almost like he was looking at art instead of a badly lit, badly framed image of a horrible mutilation. Surgical. What about his clothes? Anything unusual there? Don't think so. Just... Speare heard the car coming before it appeared. One of the few benefits of sharing his head with a demon. He ducked down to the floor just in case. Majowski picked up his phone and started playing with it. Just a cop taking a break for a few minutes, maybe digesting a couple of Big Macs before heading back out onto the streets. Or, considering he was riding unmarked, just a dude digesting Big Macs. Either way, nothing for random passers-by to pay attention to. I hope nobody's looking out any windows, he said. They'll think you're servicing me down there. That's sexual harassment, you know, Speare said, amused in spite of himself. I'm going to make a complaint. Yeah, I'm sure that'll go to the top of the list. Majowski set down the phone. You can get up now, they're gone. The pictures seemed worse the second time he looked at them, maybe because his initial curiosity had been satisfied and now he had to realize what he was looking at, to think about it. Were you at the scene? Have you seen him? Majowski nodded. Not a pretty sight. Like he'd thought it would be. His clothes, were they bloody too? I mean, in the pictures here, his shirt is next to the body, but was there any blood that might not have been his, or any other clues as to location, or anything? They were on the ground outside a dumpster, Majowski shrugged. Hey, don't look at me like that. They were just clothes. No blood other than what looked like minor seepage from being placed next to the body. Lots of garbage and slime from being left there. They had kind of a funny smell, too. Kind of bitter and tingly. The kind of smell that makes you want to cough. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe it wasn't Fallerstein then. A lot of things used in occult rituals smelled bitter or strange, especially things used when dealing with demons, summoning them, controlling or imprisoning them, banishing them. Point was, if Theodore's murder had been a ritual killing, that was a problem, since the Vegas families weren't supposed to engage in magics of that type. Almost everything else was okay, but hands-on rituals to cause deaths in other families were off limits. That agreement had been made 40 years or so before, and Speare had never heard of anyone violating it. "Is there some way I can get a look at it, in person?" Majowski thought for a moment. "Maybe. I might be able to pull the evidence bag and bring it out to show you. I don't know about opening it, though. Chain of custody and all." Speare tried not to laugh. "Do you think this is ever going to make it to a trial?" "Oh, right. I guess it doesn't matter much." Wait a minute. Something else caught Speare's eye. Something that made the beast in his head shiver in a way that was half pleasant, half unpleasant. A way that reminded him the thing was there, as if he could ever forget. It recognized that mark. It felt it, even third hand, printed on paper. He held up the photo, angled so Majowski could see what he meant. "This mark. Was this fresh?" Majowski looked, but obviously didn't see what Speare saw. Well, of course he didn't. He was normal. "I don't know. We won't have a cause of death until the autopsy, like I said, but..." "Was this mark fresh? Did it smell of anything? Did you notice anything odd? Other than the missing arm, I don't see any other marks on him. Were there any?" The mark on the back of Theodore's neck, a tiny, almost invisible little black squiggle like a fancy bracket on a keyboard, didn't look like much at all, Speare knew. But if he was right about what it was, if he was right, they had a hell of a lot more to worry about than one death. Literally, a hell of a lot more. "Back off, Speare." Majowski's hand slid down to rest on his holster. "You've always been decent to me, and Duretti wants me to help you out, so I will. But I know your reputation just as well as I knew Theodore's, and I'm not becoming a casualty." Shit. He hadn't realized he was leaning in so close, looming quite so, well, loomingly. He sat back in his seat and lifted his palms in what looked like a shrug, but which they both knew was him letting Majowski see his hands. "I could tear that gun out of your hand and shoot you with it before you had a chance to stop me, you know." "You could try." Majowski's smile was friendly, and if it wasn't as warm as it had been before, it was warm enough to show that he knew he hadn't just been threatened. Speare liked him even better for that. Not every situation like the one they were in ended with everybody getting to keep their dignity. "Anyway," he held up the picture again. "Did you see this mark? Did you notice anything about it?" "It wasn't blistered," Majowski said. "So it happened at the time of death, or immediately after. Burned into the skin, like a brand. Doesn't look like a brand, though. Why?" "It's not a brand." Shit. It was even worse than he'd worried it would be. "It was a demon sword. Somebody got hold of a demon sword, and they used it to kill Theodore." Vegas was not one of those nothing starts until midnight cities. That was one of the things he loved about it. Any time, day or night, he could head for the Strip, or usually the areas just outside of it, and find something to do, and people to do it with. It was the closest a man with a problem like his would ever get to heaven. Speaking of the problem, a slight tremor rolled down his spine. Just a twitch, really, not even big enough to count as a shudder, but big enough to serve as a warning. Lying and a little gluttony hadn't been enough to hold him, to hold the thing inside him anyway, for long. He could feel it coiled in the back of his head, waiting, getting hungry. Funny how something that lived in his head could be such a pain in his ass. Theodore had last been seen alive around 2:30 in the morning at Fortuna's Wheel, a dive bar that catered to the occult and criminal underworlds, which had a considerable amount of overlap. It was a damned good place to find sins of all kind. Speare had ended more than a few nights by stumbling out of the place with a woman on his arm, or some black market goods in his car, or both. The beast inside him wasn't picky about the type of sin he had to commit to keep it quiet, as long as it was sin. Which was another reason he loved living in Vegas. Sin was everywhere he looked. It filled the air with its rich, spicy fragrance and covered everything with an aura of shiny, greeny gold. The city's blood was thick with it, like plasma, and it pumped through every building, every street, every single person crowding together under the lights. They glowed with avarice and envy, with gluttony and lust and vanity. Just being near them all made the beast in his head awaken further, and he hated how much its excitement became his, how they felt it together, and how good that felt. It still didn't quite dim his pleasure in the strip, but perhaps that was because he needed that pleasure. A demon sword. His blood would have run cold if it had been able to. Was some psycho running around brandishing an underworld weapon without realizing its true power, or was someone deliberately harnessing that power? Or what? Neither was a good option. But at least it gave him some kind of lead, which was why he made a left onto Sahara and kept going until he reached the Sweetheart's Delight Midnight Chapel. What a shithole it was. Every time he parked in the patch of broken pavement and leggy weeds that sat directly in front of the squat box of flaky tan stucco, he wondered why Felix didn't clean the place up a little, at least enough to make it believable as a wedding venue. Rather than looking like a place where love's young dream was fulfilled, it looked like a place where love was beaten and shot execution style. The only less appealing-looking place Speare could think of to get married would be a garbage barge floating down a river of sewage and misery. The dented bell above the door gave its customary off-note ping when he entered the place. Air conditioning washed over him in a damp, icy wave scented faintly with dog. Said dog rose to her feet and padded across the floor to greet him. He bent to scratch her shaggy brown head. "Hey, Parsnip. Felix around?" "I'm here." The man himself, clad in a rumpled Hawaiian shirt and age-soft khakis, pushed through the curtain of pink and green glass beads that separated the foyer from the rest of the building.
"Come on back."
Speare followed him down the hall to the large chapel area. "How's everything?"
"Oh, you know."
Felix reached the back wall, painted with a ridiculous mural of plump cherubs and cupids floating above a rainbow, surrounding a golden-rayed sun. It would have served as a backdrop for wedding pictures, as well as an added incentive for newlyweds to avoid sleep. The nightmares it could cause were profound and disturbing, as Speare knew from personal experience, if anyone had ever actually gotten married there.
"The wedding business is non-existent."
"Just the way you want it to be."
"Well, yes."
Felix unlatched the hideous mural so it swung open to reveal another room, the room that housed his real business. Shelves lined the walls, providing resting space for Felix's vast inventory of magical and occult items. Grimoires and bones and ritual daggers, bezoars and stones and bottles of holy water, every type of magical powder and substance known to man or beast, or anything in between. All of it sat on the shelves, and more lay in heaps and stacks and boxes on the floor and filled cabinets and at least one back storeroom.
"I can't have people in here wanting to get married. That's just boring."
"Well, here's something that isn't boring." Speare sat on one of the stools at the counter next to the one Felix chose for himself. "Theodore Bryant was found dead this morning, about 6 blocks away from here." Felix's watery eyes grew larger in his sallow face. Speare always thought he looked like a fox with rheumatism, his sharp features obscured by 5 o'clock shadow and weary cynicism. Even his hair was fox-like, a bushy reddish-brown swept back from a widow's peak, graying at the temples.
"Theodore?"
Speare nodded. Felix reached over the counter and produced a bottle of whiskey and a couple of glasses and sloshed 2 fingers' worth into each glass.
"What a tragedy,"
he said, clasping his fists on his chest.
"May his soul arise in the realm of silver."
Speare returned the gesture, and they both drank a toast. "He was murdered."
"I assumed that."
Felix poured some more.
"You wouldn't be here about his death if he hadn't been,
I also assume Doretti knows my price.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?